Is it Jim Jordan time? Some House Republicans think so because they're gearing to bring a vote to the floor on their nominee for Speaker, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, despite the fact he does not seem to have the necessary 217 votes that it would take to win. That's according to latest reporting from The Hill. Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, who spearheaded former Speaker Kevin McCarthy's ouster, has accused his colleagues in the so-called swamp of trying to block a vote. Here he is on Newsmax over the weekend. Take a look.
After having elected Jim Jordan of Ohio, the House Speaker designate, on Friday, we took Saturday off, we're taking today off, and I've just learned that Pro Tem Patrick McHenry will now ensure that we take Monday off and we don't vote. I am here in Washington. We are meeting with our colleagues. My colleague Corey Mills came back from Israel, where he was engaging in harrowing rescues to be here to elect Jim Jordan for Speaker. But what the swamp is trying to do, they're trying to delay a vote for Jim Jordan because they know he is not beholden to the lobbyists and special interests here.
Meanwhile, Politico's Olivia Beavers reported that a group of House Republicans are planning not only to oppose a Jordan speakership, but vote for a challenger instead. We don't know who that is of yet. 2024 GOP candidate Nikki Haley tried to blame the gridlocked speaker's vote on President Biden, but CNN's Jake Tapper wasn't having it. Let's take a look.
Well, I'll tell you what's right is under the Biden administration, we've seen chaos with inflation and the fact that people
You can't blame that on
Biden.
You can't blame this on Biden.
No, you can't. Well, you have to let me finish.
Okay.
We have seen chaos with inflation. We've seen chaos with the lack of transparency in education. We've seen chaos on the border. We've seen chaos with crime on the streets. And now we're seeing chaos around the world. What I'm saying is, you can't fix Democrat chaos with Republican chaos. They need to get it together. They need to get in a room and figure out who this is going to be and come out unified. That's what Republicans need to do.
All right.
I mean, they don't have to. They can just continue to have this internal debate over who is going to lead the Republican coalition. Matt Gaetz really wants it to be Jim Jordan, but he just doesn't appear to have the votes yet. Look, if you're Jim Jordan has articulated a different policy, I think, to some degree at least, on Ukraine than McCarthy did. So that's if you're a non-interventionist Republican looking for to America first, dollars here kind of thing, I see why you would prefer Jim Jordan to McCarthy and maybe to the other options. However, what's going to happen if there's a new speaker and we're considering legislation is going to be a massive aid package to Israel, which is that what Republican voters actually want? I think it's going to be at least pretty divided on that. So as long as this leadership question is not solved and the work of the federal government is thwarted, I mean, sorry, Matt Gaetz, let's take Tuesday off. Let's take Wednesday off. Enjoy your vacation. You've earned it, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, Nikki Haley on some level is kind of making the Democrats' argument that if you think the world is so dire, if you think inflation is so bad, why can't you get your caucus together and get votes
Well, this
going?
is my criticism of her. She's not an American. I mean, she's self-admittedly, she's not being dishonest. She is not an American first candidate. She's a neoconservative candidate. She wants us to fund and support all these efforts abroad. So, of course, she wants
right, but
Republican
even the war stuff
together.
aside, if you're mad about Biden, about domestic policy, inflation, some of the other things that she mentioned, what Democrats have been saying is that this demonstrates to the American people that Republicans aren't serious about government. And historically, Republicans have kind of gotten away with threats to shut down the government, et cetera, because if your kind of stance is that you don't think government is useful, if you are someone who would echo Reagan saying the scariest words in the world are "hi, I'm the government and I'm here to help," well, then obviously there's no negative implications to the shutdown. But now they're in this place where they're having difficulty making that argument because they are saying there are things that need to be done differently than how Joe Biden has done them. Put us in charge and we'll be able to right the ship. That's an affirmative message about what I plan to do. But you can't really effectively make the case that you're the party to do it if you can't get your party in a row to actually to pick a speaker, much less vote on some of these issues. Now, I'm one who's very supportive of what Matt Gaetz and them are doing. And so far, it's foregrounding the gaps between what they tend to focus on in government and what legislators tend to be willing to vote on and the things that people actually want to see change in the United States. So him surfacing some of these anti-corruption bills and talking about preventing members of Congress from trading stocks, especially now when we are seeing all of the stock activity related to defense stocks in the head of this war in Israel. I mean, that now's the time. I'm supportive of that, but I do think it complicates the political message in the context of an election year.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And going back to what you said about the Reagan quote, I love that quote. Of course, that does reflect my ideology, but just you need what limited government conservatives and libertarians want is a plan to shrink the parts of the government that are spending recklessly or that we think are not necessary or that are causing harm. Suddenly pulling the plug at random and then restarting and then pulling the plug again on the entire operation is not good, and also just gives and then the things you want cut and don't get cut. They continue to operate. It hurts the economy because it creates this uncertainty. We don't want to create uncertainty in the whole economic system. We want reform and serious policy that eliminates the waste, the corruption, and the bloat. That is not accomplished by shutting down the government every time they need to come to some kind of consensus about where we're going to spend our money.
Now, you raised the political question of what voters are thinking about all of this. I don't want to read too much into a kind of one-off event, but there was this viral clip over the weekend that I'm sure you saw of Ron DeSantis in a heated exchange with a voter over Israel's airstrikes in Gaza. After going back and forth with Ron DeSantis arguing that we should not be funding and facilitating these airstrikes, the prospective voter said, "You had my vote, you don't now." And so it does seem there is this kind of more sincerely, I think, anti-war, anti-interventionist, isolationist, whatever you want to call it, section of the Republican Party that's looking around and finding that there aren't very many people to carry the banner, including, I would say, RFK Jr., who seems to, I mean, the Hamas attack is probably the worst thing that could have happened to his campaign at this moment, because it's resurfaced some of the criticisms about his attitude toward Israel-Palestine policy and made him just say more and more statements at events that are pretty damning to his reputation as someone who would want to be anti-interventionist and a pro-peace candidate.
Right. I mean, I have to point out that the most prominent person on the right who was really a true anti-interventionist from a conservative standpoint is Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson is now estranged from the network,
yes,
where he had a major and a mainstream platform into cable news and into respectable discourse. He's still a very important and very influential person that a lot of people are watching on X. But it's not the same level of influence over what other conservatives are going, yes, to say. They had to take seriously your Ben Shapiro's, your Sean Hannity's, your Newsmax's, the conservative kind of take-having industry had to pay a lot more attention to what Tucker was saying, because he was calling them out from within that machine. And now he's outside that machine. And again, he's still very influential. We react to what he has to say. A lot of people are watching him. But there is a benefit to having that voice within the mainstream, yeah, apparatus, because he can call out other people from within it. And, I know people, liberals, people on the left, anti-interventionists of a different ideological bent, certainly I understand have a lot of differences and problems with Tucker Carlson. No. But this would be a moment where I think he, yeah, would have tremendous positive influence over the discourse, which again you can and should, and I have done on our show, condemning the terrorist attacks, calling out Hamas, calling out voices I think in our country that are not being strong enough against that, but at the same time urging restraint, yeah, on the American government's foreign policy response in the same way that restraint was called for after we were attacked on 9/11
and was not listened to.
And was not listened to. And Tucker, yeah, can credibly make that argument. And is
a friend of mine. I was talking to a lefty friend of mine over the weekend whose father is conservative, and Israeli, and has been watching Fox News. And he was lamenting that there's no moderating influence on Fox News anymore, and that is affecting his attitude toward the crisis in a way that obviously differs pretty significantly from his son's views on the issue. So I might not ordinarily have agreed with that or anticipated that was going to be a real effect of him leaving Fox, but it's hard to deny at this point.
Yeah, I wish Tucker was on Fox and Glenn Greenwald was on MSNBC and someone of the same bent was on CNN or our show was on CNN and we could all be arguing against, hold on now, just because of this is a crisis and it's very bad does not mean the U.S. should race headfirst into another global war on terror kind of situation.
Or that we should support Israel leveling Gaza.
Yeah. More Rising right after this.